This will be a short recording today. For anybody who's not here, they can look at it or re-look at it if you want to later. And let's go ahead and share the screen. Come on, there you go. Okay. Might as well turn them all on while we're here. Okay. Uh, we're in our 6th week, and then just 3 days before the third practicum, and then 2 weeks for the rest of the material. We're really almost completely finished with the practical material, having gone through it once. I'm not saying that you know it yet. Okay, we definitely have to review it, and we will. Okay, what I want to go over is fetal circulation here, and I'll turn it on for anybody that wants it. You may have to print it later. You can print it now. Just be on mute. Okay, fetal circulation in the vertebral model. This is going to be on the test on Thursday. Okay, we have two systems here. We can call them the left and right if we want to. The left one is of the fetus. This is the circulatory system of the fetus, of the unborn. And then once birth has occurred, the system changes some of its components physically, and we have the newborn situation. Now, the newborn is precisely like you and me. So you could also call this newborn, adolescent, juvenile, adult. Okay, this is the adult system, and we pretty much have gone over that. Okay. The fetus gets all of its nourishment from the mother. Nothing new about that. We've got to get a blood supply. We've got to get oxygenated blood moving around in the fetus, and we've also got to have absorbed nutrients, food, moving around in the fetus. That transfer of oxygenated blood and food takes place in the fetus at the placenta. Here's the placenta. Okay. And the blood, which is strictly that of the fetus at this point, the mother's blood comes close on the other side of the placenta. There is exchange, okay, but the blood is supposed to remain separate. Comes into this red vessel that we see going all the way up to the liver. This is the umbilical vein as a part of the umbilical cord. Now, let's see, where did they put the word umbilical vein? They put the word umbilical vein right here in the middle. We follow the arrow over, and yes, it's the umbilical vein. It's being wrapped or spiraled by a double helix, which is the umbilical arteries. There are two of those. Together, the umbilical arteries and the umbilical vein make up the umbilical cord. Well, we need to follow this in a logical manner. We need to have the blood come in and go up towards the heart. It's going to hit the liver first. This is the umbilical vein. Here's a vein that has oxygenated blood. Okay. It's a vein because it goes from a set of capillaries in the placenta to the heart. That's the definition of a vein. It travels towards the heart. Okay. Now, as it goes through the liver, it doesn't get processed by the liver the way an adult blood stream gets processed. It actually does get to all parts of the liver because the liver itself has to have nutrients and blood that's oxygenated. But the majority of the blood passes right on through the liver and joins the inferior vena cava right here. Since it's joining the vena cava by bypassing the liver, we call this a shunt, a shortcut, a shunt. Okay, now the blood's entered into the vena cava. The vena cava itself is pictured here as being deoxygenated blood. Well, once the two come together, the umbilical vein and the vena cava, there's got to be an increase in oxygenation at that point because you're mixing a low and a highly oxygenated vessel. Unfortunately, so that you don't worry about it later, the diagram does not show any color change up here. And that's unfortunate for me. I'd like to see something between red and blue right up in here. It doesn't happen. The blood joins the vena cava, and the vena cava is returning from
It's
all
purple.
parts of. Okay, the vena cava is returning from all parts of the body, and it enters as normal into the right atrium. Blood coming from the head region and the arm region enters through the superior vena cava, and it goes to the right atrium as well. Now, there's two ways out of the right atrium. Okay, I probably shouldn't have ignored the coronary sinus, but the picture here does. The coronary sinus, some of the blood returning from the coronary circulation enters into the right atrium as well. Okay, so now we've got the blood, all of it passing eventually through the right atrium. Well, one thing that can happen to it is just like in the adult. It goes down through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle, through the pulmonary semilunar valve, into the pulmonary trunk. Now here they're showing the pulmonary trunk, and they're showing it pink because they're saying it's oxygenated. This is something that burns me up with these illustrators. How did they get oxygenated all of a sudden? Well, it always was. And they really should have had that color over here where I suggested. Okay, but just follow the pathway. Pulmonary semilunar valve into the pulmonary trunk. Now we expect from the pulmonary trunk it will go to each lung along the pulmonary arteries. Here's one, here's the other. Okay. But these are rather small. The lungs do not need a lot of oxygenation. That we're not breathing as a fetus. The tissue of the lung needs to be dealt with and given oxygenated blood and nutrients. But most of this blood bypasses the lungs. And here's where it bypasses right here.
Charlie?
Yeah,
At what week gestation does this develop?
I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, not an obstetrician or a gynecologist. And You know, I'm not too fond of kids. I'm sorry. I probably should know it, but I just don't. I don't want to either. Okay, now moving forward here, there's a shunt again. This one's called the ductus arteriosus. Here's the name: ductus, duct, arteriosus, artery. And where does it go? It goes right into the aortic arch after the aortic arch has made its loop or bend. Okay, so the blood flowing into here from the pulmonary trunk immediately goes into the aortic arch, and now it goes down in the abdominal aorta, which properly enough is shown in pink, oxygenated. Here's the aorta. Okay, some of that blood, not all of it, some of that blood will veer off into the femoral arteries and common iliac artery, into two vessels which we won't have as adults. Here's one of them, and here's the other. It's underneath, and they're going up beside the bladder. These are the umbilical arteries. These two pair up, go through the navel or umbilicus, wind their way down the umbilical vein, okay, and bring blood to the placenta. This blood is still partially oxygenated. That's why the color is not blue here. And so it doesn't take a lot of oxygenation to bring it up to the red stage. Okay. That's one thing that can happen. Now, blood back at the right atrium comes from the two vena cava and the coronary sinus. Okay. This blood here is actually somewhat oxygenated. They're not showing it to us. Uh, I'll mention it tomorrow as well then. This is probably the most oxygenated chamber. In the adult, it's the least oxygenated chamber, but it's receiving oxygen, oxygenated blood from the liver shunt here, okay? And that's probably the most oxygenated we'll find. Well, I had it first go down into the right ventricle, but there's another way that this can pass. When the right atrium compresses, the left one does at the same time. The blood can also go, follow this little arrow, through a hole and come out over here. Okay. And it comes out in the left atrium. There's a bypass, a hole between the left and the right atria. That's called the foramen ovale, the exact same name as you learned in the skull, but for a different purpose here, the foramen ovale. Okay, the foramen ovale pushes some oxygenated blood straight across to the left atrium, down through the mitral valve and up through the aortic semilunar valve, and now to the aortic arch. The difference between this and the ductus arteriosus shunt is that the blood that went through the foraminal valve came around and got into the aortic arch, or the ascending aorta first and then the aortic arch, did so before these three vessels came off. Remember our ABCs: aorta, brachiocephalic, common carotid, subclavian. So now the blood is going to go to the head and the arm. Well, we had to have that happen. The blood has to go to the head of the arm. Any blood that bypasses this or gets by it will go into the abdominal region. So we've got both areas covered, okay, without utilizing the lungs for reoxygenation, okay, because they're not functional for that. They're just an organ that has to be kept alive until you're born and can use it. Okay, this allows the use of the mother's blood and nutrients, and also that provides a place for exchange at the placenta. 4 things happen at birth. And when I say they happen at birth, this one I know when it happens right at birth. Okay. One thing that happens at birth is the ductus venosus. This one that shuts through the liver. It collapses. It collapses and is forever afterwards as a fragment or leftover called the ligamentum venosum. Some of your editions of the book do not have these square boxes around them. If you have a book that doesn't have that, I would suggest printing this page because these square boxes really help. The ductus venosus becomes the ligamentum venosum at birth. So this pathway is going to be cut off. What else is going to be cut off? Let's go to the first one up here. And remember, we went through the pulmonary trunk and bypassed to the aortic arch. At birth, the ductus arteriosus collapses. It's always present in scar tissue. We can see it on a real human heart or on the models even. The ductus arteriosus becomes the ligamentum arteriosum. Third thing that happens is that the vessels attached to the umbilical vein, since it collapses, these detach. The umbilical arteries collapse also. And so the placenta has been released and the cord is going to be lost or expelled. So all of this goes, this part here and this part in here. That's the third thing that happens. The fourth thing that happens is the one thing that of the 4 that takes place in the heart, and that's the foramen ovale. The opening or hole between the 2 atria closes, and the foramen ovale, here it is, becomes the fossa ovalis. It closes over and seals. If the seal doesn't form, you'll end up with what they call a blue baby. Sometimes it may be an hour or 2 late, and they can wait for a while. But if it's more than a day late or so, they will in fact operate, and so there'll be open heart surgery immediately. Okay, that's got to close. In many of us, it's found the closure isn't perfect. In other words, it's an oval opening, foramen ovale, but it leaves a pinhole size passageway from one atria to the other, even as an adult. It can be pinhole size, it can be a little bit bigger, and you can still function. It's just that you probably will not be an Olympic champion in track and field. You probably will not be able to muster the ability to do that. Now, if we look over at the other side, there's really nothing to show you. You've seen it before, okay? Here you have the navel or umbilicus, and you have the ligamentum teres. I didn't give you that term, and I won't ask you. And you have the leftovers of the arteries, the umbilical arteries. These are leftovers. You can call them scar tissue or artifacts. But the rest of this is the same that we've gone over in class with many times with those models of the heart. We'll be doing those again, probably starting tomorrow. We've got all tomorrow to review with nothing new for lab, only review tomorrow and Wednesday. Okay, now, the first time through on this, some people have problems, some people have none. Take a look at it again tonight, or take a look at it again tomorrow morning before our class, and bring any questions with you that you might have.
Charlie, I have one question now, actually.
Okay.
The ligaments that are left over after like the ductus arteriosus collapses at birth, do those have any function that we should know?
No.
Or scar tissue?
No, they're just scar tissue.
Thank you.
Okay. Here it is in text, by the way, okay? You have it in your book. Well, I wrote it out too. Here's the 4 changes that occur at birth. Okay, now we're going to look at a vertebra model. Has nothing to do with the circulatory system, has nothing to do with the urinary system. It has nothing to do with anything that we've studied so far with the practicum on Thursday. So why is it here? The honest answer is one semester years ago, 10 or more, somehow or other, somebody decided that we'd shuffle who makes up which test. I made up this test. I have made up this test every time but one time. And I love this test that you're having on Thursday. But this one time, people did a shuffle, and instructors did. And I don't know what test I made up, but it wasn't this one. It was one of the physiologists, and they inserted a couple of questions on the vertebra. Great when you're studying the nervous system, but we're not yet. We will be next week. Okay, so here we are stuck with this question. In all the tests, everybody does it, and nobody objects to it. I just like to tell you how it came about. Okay. So here's the structures that we're going to look at. Okay. The dorsal root, ventral root, gray matter, white matter, dorsal horn means nothing to you till we get to the picture. Ventral horn, dorsal root ganglion, spinal nerve, sympathetic trunk ganglion, and dura mater. Okay, now we've gotten to the picture. So this is what counts. You've seen a vertebra, obviously, back in the bone section. This vertebra, this is the spinous process, and it's split. We call that being bifid, B-I-F-I-D. When you have bifid spinous processes, you know you have a cervical vertebra. They're the only ones that have that. And cervical vertebra are the only ones that have the vertebral, the transverse foramen. Now, there's a hole here It's being filled, however, by vessels that are going through. We don't have this on thoracic vertebra. We only have it on the cervical vertebra, if you remember those transverse foramina that we looked at. Okay. Here's the spinal cord itself, deep inside here. It runs down the body, it runs up the body. It runs as high as the brain stem, and it goes down as far as the area that we call L2. Not a lecture test 2. We just took that. This L2 means lumbar 2. Your spinal cord doesn't go all the way down your back. It only goes to L2. Okay. We'll talk more about that. Incoming information, stimuli, feeling, touch, heat, pressure, pain, they come up this way from here, and they pass by this bulge. This is known as the dorsal root ganglion. And then keep on going to the dorsal root and into the dorsal side of the spinal cord, into what's called the dorsal horn. Okay, afferent or efferent? Afferent, incoming, loving. Okay, afferent stimuli come by the dorsal root, always to your back. Then they'll cross over into the cord itself. The darker material here is gray matter. The lighter material is white matter. Things move a little bit more slowly in gray matter because it seems to do things that are more thoughtful, even in the spinal cord. In the white matter, stimuli tend to move faster, about twice as fast. Okay. Back to here, where we come in is the dorsal horn. Now, from here, where the arrow is, you just have to imagine, this can go up to the brain. It can go down to L2 or anywhere in between. It can also move over into the white matter and zoom up to the brain faster because the white matter is always faster, or down to L2. When things reach the brain, like your brain, think about it. Sometimes you don't care. You get a stimulus, there's a tiny little ant on you or something like that. You don't care. You don't do anything about it. Other times you care tremendously and you activate a whole bunch of skeletal muscles to take care of the problem. Okay. When you do activate muscles, whether they're skeletal or smooth muscles, the information can come from anywhere in the spinal cord or the brain and exit here at the ventral root. And it passes out. This is the ventral root right here. And the ventral going out and the dorsal coming in pass through this structure called the spinal nerve. It's not labeled here, so don't worry about it here. If I didn't mention it, this was the dorsal horn. This is the ventral horn. They look like moose antlers.
Wait, Charlie?
Yeah.
So what was the difference between the ventral root and the dorsal root?
Okay, dorsal root is incoming.
Okay.
Ventral root is outgoing. Another way of saying it, the dorsal root is afferent coming in, and the ventral root is efferent going out.
But if I'm not mistaken, does it look like it's kind of like a cylindrical tube, or am I just
Where?
like when the dorsal root meets to the like it looks like it connects with the ventral root towards the end.
Here?
18 and 17 are.
Yeah, I
Horizontally?
see what you're talking about, but they're not connected. They're just butt up against each other.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. That's the way it is. Okay. This is going to make a lot of sense to you soon. I'll go over it enough that you definitely will get all four of the questions. There's always four on this one for Thursday. Now, here's our same picture. Okay. But we're looking at the coating right now, the protective sheath. It's in, I believe, gray. It goes around the ventral and the dorsal, goes up and around here, the spinal cord. There's actually 3 layers, but we're primarily interested in this one layer. Here, it completely covers the ventral root on this side and the dorsal root. This is the dura mater. That's what the only thing that's labeled here. The dura mater translates to tough mama. We're looking at the same thing tilted back. Okay, now it's a little bit nicer here to see the ventral roots. This is the dorsal root back here. This is the dorsal root here. This is the dorsal root ganglion. That assumes that you know what a ganglion is. You probably do or don't. It doesn't, I mean, it has to be one or the other. You will know it, okay? But not yet. We have these little bulges here, one on the other side, and they're connected to that spinal nerve and come out. These little bulges number 31 pairs. This is a pair of them. They go up between each of your vertebrae, all the way up your back, all the way down, past L2, in fact. These are sympathetic trunk ganglia. They're also known as chain ganglia. If for some people they say it hurts, other people say it's wonderful pain. To have somebody rub both sides of your spinous processes with a little bit of force and massage these guys. The sympathetic trunk ganglion, just like its name implies, has to do with the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic portion. I know you've heard autonomic nervous system. It's a black box probably to you right now. We'll take care of that. We'll take care of that.
Charlie,
Yes.
in that diagram, where would the muscle be located?
What muscle?
Is that
Oh, the muscle that's being innervated. Innervated means caused to function. This is going out here. This has got to go out into the arm or the leg or the body wall. There is no muscle in this picture.
okay?
I mean, if you want to see muscle, it's not shown in any of these pictures, but I would look to the tunica media of the blood vessels. Okay. Definitely you would be able to find muscle there. but this is primarily nervous tissue. It does have a capillary supply, but it's not showing here. Okay. They asked me to give this every time, so it's going to be on our test. But it's just a few words, and you have learned many things blindly in this course, only to understand what they are later on. And that's going to be the case here. Okay. But it's only going to be these terms that are being pointed to. Okay. So you can begin studying them, and I certainly will be going over them with you. Okay, let me see. Okay, any questions? Because that's all I'm going to keep you here today. You've had enough. Okay, well, if you have a question, you can stick around or email me. And otherwise, just feel free to click off at any time.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you, Charlie.
Bye-bye.
Really.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
I'll look at that question 12, and then I'll look at each test and see what the person put down. If they put the correct answer, they're going to get credit. If they were misled by the test, the practice quiz, then I'll give them credit. If they never took the practice quiz, I'm not going to give them credit. That makes sense? Okay, they wouldn't be misled. So it'll come out fair.
Thanks, Charlie.
Okay.
Thanks, Charlie. I was definitely scratching my head on that question.
Oh, sorry. I want to take a look at it and see what's going on.
Bye, Charlie. See you tomorrow. Did you have a question, Randy? Oh, I was just saying bye, Charlie. See you tomorrow.
Oh, okay. Then you stayed there.
Hi, Charlie. Are we gonna outline any other chapters or only the chapters 23 and 24?
You're going to outline one over the weekend.
Oh, okay.
I'm not going to give you anything now between now and the practicum.
Okay.
There's only 3 more days, you know. I just don't think that's fair.
Okay. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Charlie. See you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Charlie?
Um, can I ask you a question? Charlie, can you hear me? Charlie, can you hear me? Charlie, can you hear me?